Okay, so it's been a while since I've done a video, and I have been tinkering with grids and doing the layouts and stuff, and particularly obviously the project I've set you as a task. But in doing that, there's probably some minor sub points that I probably need to cover as we go into that. So I have been trying to look at the most efficient way to do things. Right. And it's getting used to using unordered lists and grids and going between the two, and then also having subgrids. So let's just connect up everything that we need to connect up. Body. Right. And what are we going to do? We're going to do an unordered list. We have a class, because that way we can separate it out from any other unordered lists that we might potentially have. And I will just call it container, I guess. Or yeah, container. Container. Right. So in this, obviously, for each unordered list item, you have for every in your unordered list, for everything you put in there, you put a list item. You can't inside there put a div, right? Everything needs to be inside a list item. That being said, there's no reason why a div can't go inside a class. Or there's no reason why, or can it? I think you can put it. Yeah. No. You see, yeah. So you have to, your divs have to be inside your classes. You can obviously give these classes as well. Whatever. But there are other ways to select. If you just want to select just the first one, there's tags to do that anyway. Right, okay, so what are we going to have in it? Well, initially we want to have something that resembles this layout, which I'll just drag in. This is the main layout we did as a task, and I'm looking at this thing down here and wanting to be able to have a couple rows, and then as the screen shrinks up like this, I want these to be able to kind of grow and shrink with it. So in terms of that there, we're going to have obviously an image, source equals images, and I've just got that placeholder image. And then looking at what else we're going to do is, sorry, I closed that article, I shouldn't have. So I want to do like this overlay here. So I've got these two boxes, a title, and then I want to put some subtitles underneath it, and then have them resizing, because doing overlap is something traditionally has been quite frustrating and fiddly to do. So let's get our image in there first. I'm guessing, yeah, let's get our image in there first. Let's just take one thing at a time, eh? Right, so I'm going to put 4 images in. And let's just see what it does before I do anything with it. Come on. Right. I'm going to take this and I'm going to open up Nightly. Drag that in here. Right. Put this in. The reason why I'm going to use Nightly rather than Chrome is because of the developers tools with being able to see here. If I set a grid, you can actually see in here, they'll actually give you the grid model. So, right, first things first, then with your style sheet, I'll turn off any margins or anything like that. So, margin 0 pixels, padding 0 pixels, list style, which is what gives you bullet points next to your list items, none. Any links, I don't want the underline, so text decoration none. Is there anything else that I particularly wish to turn off? I think that's pretty much everything off the top of my head. Oh, and I'll set a font, Dosh family, and I'll mix it up. Because that is close to what the article looks like. Right. So I had a class of container, which needs a dot in front of it for a class. Right, so container, we're going to go say display grid. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is let's just save that and then see what it does from here. So currently my grid's just basically, my images are going to be the size the images are. So as I shrink this in, I'm losing stuff because the images are set size and the images are spilling over my grid. But if I do this, you can see here's my grid. So basically each box fills a grid. So I want to set basically a width on here. So then I'm going to say for my container, I want to say grid dash template columns, which is your rows across. I'm going to say be 50 of the view width of the window. So you can see there's a line there now. Problem is, the image hasn't kind of listened at all. So I'm going to have to go to the image. So to look is to grab the image then. We've got that container, sure. It's a list item and then it's an image. So I could probably just go dot container image and it will still pick it up. If I wanted to be quite accurate, I would do that. Doesn't matter either way normally for some things, but it just, once you start getting quite a few overlapping elements, then yes, it can be. So I'm going to say width 100%. There you go. And see how there's a little gap? So if we highlight onto one, oh, that's too high up. The image isn't actually, based off its width to height ratio, it's not quite filling it. So if I do something like this, actually nothing wrong with doing a bit of that. Right, so the next thing is, okay, great, I've got these images in here. Now what I want is, I wanted it to be, when it's, okay, maybe I want this to be 3 across, and I want it to be maybe more like 70% of the page. Or I can bump it to 70% of the page without too much hassle. So if I go here, and I can say, right, 70%. There you go, it's done that. But I want the things inside the grid to be a certain layout, certain size, certain what have you. So I've said to everything to be 70% wide. I'm like, no, I don't want it to be 70% wide. I maybe want this container to be 70%, but I want these ones to actually fit in kind of like a grid layout. So I probably need something to wrap around this. Say that be 70%, and then this to have a different requirement on it. So if I go div class, oops, equals main. Right. Let's chuck that in there. Is it strict about what order you have to put things in? In some instances, yes. I tend to group the more important elements at the top, and then if this has got sub things, you kind of group them together. Makes it less confusing. Okay. So I'll basically take this and shift it into that one. Now I can have a grid. So I could do this. Right. So now if I highlight the main grid, I saved it, refresh. So as I highlight main, you can see there's that, and there's a grid down the side. There's only two vertically, and then these sub ones are just kind of filling in down here in the row. So there's no longer like a grid going in there. So this one here is now going to be that container. So I'm going to say display grid dash template columns, and I might say repeat 3,1 fraction. So now they're 3. So if I click off that grid and on this grid, we can see that it's like this. Now it's made a second row mainly because it was 3 across. I had 4 items, and so CSS Grids kind of does a lot of filling in the gaps. It'll be like, well, I'll just kind of follow the pattern and then make a fourth one. So that way you've actually got, in terms of rows, you've got 1, 2, 3 in terms of your number rather than just these two. So if there was one less element, then it would just do that. But it'll figure the gaps out. Now this is okay so far. Looking at this, there's a bit of a gap, so let's give ourselves a gap. Now, grids is really nice for doing gaps because you can do something like, you can do grid gap. Grid gap. Grid gap can actually take in two things. So I can have a gap of 10 pixels vertically and then nothing left right. So there's that gap there. Or I can obviously do it the other way. Or I can just put in one and it will do both. Or you can say, I want the gap between the two to be bigger and the ones the top bottom to be smaller. So you can kind of control, oops, got that around the wrong way. So obviously that's left, right, and this is top, bottom. Right, so you can do things like that as well. So that's all good and well. So now we want to do is put the text overlap with the blurb underneath, which is, this is where it starts to get a bit more tricky and layers on bit by bit. So, and not to mention, I don't have, like, it just shrinks up and down. Before we start getting into layers and layers of detail. Okay, so we've told them to repeat 3 times 1 fraction. Basically means however many things you got on there, just divide it up evenly. So it'll do 33.33 reoccurring perfectly, and so this is why you get these perfect divisions. So it's very, very nice. But what I want it to do is say repeat, and then just basically have a minimum and a maximum size. So I'm going to say don't repeat 3, just be auto fill. So just figure out how many numbers you need to put in there. We're going to put a min max in, and the min max is going to be the minimum. It will be say, so you have to put a fixed number in, is 200 pixels, and the maximum, I get the syntax right, it's just whatever you want it to be, auto. So let's see now as it resizes. See, there you go. So it starts jumping. So you've got a dynamic. So effectively what's happening is this, like one of these elements, once you get the, as you can see over here, it says it's 203 pixels. But once I shrink it further, just as it, if I shrink it just on the change, there we go. On the change, it's 200. You see, it's 200.533 pixels wide. So basically, once it tries to drop to 199 pixels, it's less than 200, which is then when it does this, and then it suddenly jumps back up, because the idea is that the maximum size is whatever you want it to be, but we've set an absolute minimum size. So once you're trying to squish the window in, and it says, no, I'm going to go be smaller than 200, it goes, no, it can't do that. So it's just like, well, I will autofill how many I need across, and it'll just then drop the number from 3 across to 2 across, from 2 across down to 1 across. So that there is a very nice way to get all that dynamic change done. With this is very minimal code. You could do things like this before, but traditionally it needed more code. Right. Okay, so the next thing then is we want to start getting in the other text in there. So effectively, we wanted, I'll do a few things wrong and we'll kind of go from there. And I'll just put one in to start. So I'm going to have, I'll say a minor heading, which was called an H4, and it was said lifestyle. And then we had another one that said national news. National news, according to the image I was working from. And then these ones here were H, was a main heading, H1. And then this one was saying like graduating to a new normal, graduate to a new normal. Right. So we'll see what it does with it. So it just assigns it in here. And I kind of want to put this over this one here. The problem is, if I try and say, okay, well, maybe if I grab this list item, I'll call it overlay, right? What if I try and grab this list item and then say just be over the top of that one? So dot overlay. Sorry, no, this is probably really annoying me being way down the bottom. Right. And then we'll say grid dash col 1/2. Right. Oh, but it's a second element, so it shoved it down there. Okay, so then let's go grid dash row 1/2. Oops, 1/2. So it's put it there and it's shoved the next one along. So you're like, okay, I need to grab the first list item then. So I can go like this. Dot container li. I think it's li, yeah, li first child, which basically means the first list item. And then I'll just take this and apply it to it as well. So there they go, they're overlapping. The trouble with doing it this way is as soon as I do this, and I'm saying, oh, God, I need a second one. What did I do here? I save that? I save that? Ah, I have to take the class off this one because it's obviously got the same class. So it's wanted to put a new place. Otherwise, when I had the same class, they're putting them in the same place. And so now I'm going to have to try and specify each individual list item and then each one here. And not to mention that as this window shuffles up and down, like, you know, what happens if I'm saying column 2, but then when I shrink it down to here, there's not 2 columns and it's getting confused. So this is not really going to be ideal for scaling up and down. So get rid of this one. Yep. We got rid of that one? Yeah, we did. Okay. So in terms of this, it kind of needs to be in here. But having a list item inside a list item makes it angry, so we can't do that. So we're going to make this a div class. Right. And then effectively this image now, we need to tell each of these list items to have its own grid that has two, like it's basically like got a top half and a bottom half. And then we can tell these overlapping parts to be in the top half, the image to be in the top half, and then if we make subtext to be in the bottom half. And you just went, what? So we've got our main, I need this. That can stay. I'll comment that out. So, right. So we've got our main unordered list, right? So this main unordered list that holds everything has got a grid. We're now going to give every list item, obviously they're all going to look like this. So if I scale them up for you. Right, so every list item now that's like this, they're all going to get the same grid style. So dot container li display grid, and then I'm going to say grid dash template, template dash columns equals 1 fr grid dash template rows. I'm going to say 1 fr, what the heck, fr 1 fr. So basically I've locked it down to say there should only really be go 1 across and then 2 down. Grids will tend to try and add extra things if it really needs to, but that's only if I haven't explicitly said something. So if I try and say like a number for these, it's trying to go in this grid, and I say something like 4, 5, 4, 5 like this. Because I'm explicitly saying something that contradicts this, it'll kind of grow the grid. But otherwise, the grid will assume this is correct, do this, and unless I'm saying numbers that are bigger than it, it'll just kind of mush things in, rather than making extra grids, unless I explicitly tell it to do something, and then it was like, well, I have to make more grids because 4/5 is not there. So let's just have a little look and see what this has now managed to achieve. Let's shrink this back. Okay, so these are kind of grouped together. You're like, wow, this is laying out quite nicely all of a sudden. Yes, yes it is. I could have with having everything as a list item and not putting that subgrid on, actually, let's just turn that off. So if I do this style-wise, if I turn this off, like I never did it, right? Let's just go 1, 2, 3, 4 new items, because effectively it's just said, oh, yep, these items, we'll just chuck them in the grid. And see, it's even made another new item effectively down the bottom, because these aren't kind of grouping together. But when I've said to each of these blocks, divide them in 2 now, and then, so each block has now been divided in 2. And when this is dividing it in 2, it says that's one thing, that's another thing. And so it basically just automatically assigns them to the grid. So you can see, what am I doing? Let me just click here. Why that gets you this nice result. Right. So then we're going to say, I'll style these buttons, the text and stuff in here, and then we'll go from there. So we can see my main list items. I'm going to give it a background color of a color, I'm going to say gray. Right, and you can see your gaps all highlighted. Right, then I'm going to tell my H4s, H4 background color of a dark red, and color of the text is going to be white, because that's what it was in the article. And the font size is probably like 10, I'm guessing. Right, no, 10 is too big. I should probably say pixels and put a unit on there. Yeah, so that's looking right. Now it's filling up those whole rows, because essentially an H4 element is a title, and it basically tries to fill an entire row. So we need to tell it not to do that. So to not do that, we can give it a display, but instead of doing grid, block means fill the whole row, and that's currently what it is. If we give it inline block, it means you can go in line with each other, but I can also define widths, because you're treating you like it's kind of like a block or something. So there you go, those are there. That's good. Might add a little bit of padding around it. Top bottom needs probably 0, and left right, I'll say 5 pixels. That's looking a bit nicer. Right, and this graduating to a new normal is the H1, I think, off the top of my head. H1, yeah. Right, H1, color white, font dash size is, I'll try 20 pixels, I'll see what that does. Yeah, it's okay. I think it's a bit big. We'll try 15. That's looking better. Right, and we basically want to say, take this group and put them in there. These probably need spacing from each other. So I am going to give a little bit of, not padding, sorry, margin. So top, bottom, 5 pixels. Left, right, 0 pixels, because I want to keep the alignment the same. I can then take this whole group called overlay and push the left, right. And since I've got this overlay group still sat here, I'll comment that bit out just until we're up to it. Right, so I will then say margin, top, bottom, nothing, left, right, I'll say 5 pixels. There you go, so it sit nicely there, and we just want to push it up there. So if I told the image to sit in the top half out of these 2 options, because if I now click the list item, does it give me a preview? Yeah, see, it says basically it's a box top, box bottom. And I've got this because I set it li, and see how it's got 1, 2, 3, 4? Because there's 4 LIs, it's basically said, oh, well, they've all got the same setup. So in this top item, I want to put the image, and then also the text that's down here, I want to say, you go in the top as well. And because the image is written first, the text will then go written second, and it'll be over the top. If I got the order around the other way, it'd put the text then the image over the top, and you would no longer see the text. So if I turn that off now, what's going to happen is this has been assigned a position and the image hasn't. It'll probably swap the order. Yeah. Okay, so then if I go to there and give it the same position, now they're overlaid with each other. And I want this text to be sitting in the bottom half of the box. So I've got a box here, and my div class is just filling the whole thing. And I don't want it to fill the whole thing. I actually want it to choose inside this box. I want you to just sit in the lower half or the center or a line left or right. So there's a whole bunch of things you can do, where if we look here with grids, you can align items. So currently when they haven't been given an alignment, they will just fill the whole box. They'll fill this whole kind of white box, which is that box I was highlighting. Where if you suddenly say align self, so justify is left, right, align is up and down. So if I say, we see align self, so then essentially it's no longer filling that whole box. So I can say align self end. So align self means obviously I'm talking about the thing I want to move. I could say align item. All right, so this is the one with the grid that's got the two things, and I can say align items. But every item inside here, align down the bottom, right? I'm on that one, and see it's just done that. So now when I highlight over the div class, it's just going to be as big as it is, and it lines at bottom. So that works. The other way you can do it is rather than telling the grid, when you're setting up all the rules for the grid, to say everything in it I want you to be a certain way, you might say, well, I want some things to be up and I want some things to be down. You can go to the thing you want to be down, which is the overlay, and say align self, and then I can say end. And then I don't have to worry about anything else that's been shrunk or changed. So suddenly we've got this. Now we've got this grey box here because I told it to be 2. I also told it to be, go up, 2 fractions. So basically it took a set height and just was like divide by 2. Now if I say the first one's a fraction and the second one's just automatic, it'll just fill as needed. There you go, they're gone effectively. So now if I say I want to put in some subtext that looks a bit like this in my box, and some of them might be different heights like these, I'll see how these go. But currently now if we look, this still does. So let's try and put in some subtext. So I'm just gonna because I want the text to be all kind of grouped together, I'll just give another div class. I don't know, I'm going to call it blurb, I guess, because it's kind of what it's trying to be. And I'll say, I don't know, I'll put an H2 in there, just changes to social norms. And I'll put a paragraph of text in there, and I'll say, will this further increase the rate of impression or something related to the article, don't really care. Okay, So I'm just going to copy these and chuck them in. Oh, I copied a blank. That's great. Copy, paste, delete gap, OCD. Right, paste, and paste. Right, so let's go see what it actually did. Oh, it's just figured it out automatically. Why would it do that? Because if I click on the UL, it knows the ULs too. And the height's auto, so you can see they're not longer even. It's just basically said, oh, fill me as needed. So if I go to one of the lists then and say, let's just take the second one. So there's the first blurb. There's the second blurb. Let's just add some more to it. And so it's now stretching them all to try and fit the same height as each other. And you're like, oh, okay, weird. We'll get to that in a minute. So I'll leave the text as is because there's no real point me fluffing with the text. I can make it look pretty, but what we want to do is try and get this so it's not locked into the same heights. So what is locking it into the same height is the question. Well, our container had a template for, we go back to here, turn that one off and go to our container. No, go back that one. So we were talking about a cross. We never mentioned up and down at all. It just generated down for us. And that's the other thing actually I wanted to do is I wanted to cover scroll. Being able to say, well, I want the window to be this big, and if there's more articles, I want to be able to scroll because that's something that tends to happen a wee bit. So if we zoom in here, this is actually so essentially if there was a box saying, oh no, the category is only going to be this big, but you can just scroll and you'll see, a bunch of articles. So we'll also have a tinker with that. But let's try and get these heights so that way they're not stretching images and squashing images. So let's just say grid dash template rows, which you're up and down, or say auto. Let's see what that does. Nothing. Sorry. My bad. So I've said one fraction for your image, and I've said auto for your height for the bottom. But if I go auto, there you go. It's still done nothing. Right, so just had a wee flick to have a look at what I did last time, rather than me fluffing for 10 minutes and going, oh yes, of course. So I did cover this actually before, but so you can see how we've got, let's justify, let's go down to align. So align will stop things filling everything, feeling it has to fill the box. So we basically need to do the same behavior, not with that, with this one. We need these boxes to not feel that they have to fill themselves. So if we have a look in our code, there we go. So that can be auto, that's fine. So we say align self, and I'll just say start, because we'll just get them all sitting to the top, because that way they'll sit up. If I say center, they'll sit in the middle. But there you can go. You see the heights are now changed. Right. The other thing is I wanted to talk about getting this to potentially scroll. So we still got our stretching. It goes up and down, and so we get this, and we can scroll up and down like this for just on a website page. But what if we a height? So I'm going to I know that's going to stop that. Let's refresh this. Yes. No. Yes. Yes. And let's say overflow hidden. We'll see if this works. Yeah, so you can see it's cut off there. So effectively, it's cut off. And so if I put in here, overflow, scroll, we can actually now get scrolling content. So you can see there's actually a bar here now to scroll. So there you go. For that, so you go. So that's Calais. You could put your links and everything in here as well. So you could make those links. And they all kind of sit nicely as well. So there you have it. But it's just really the main thing is knowing where to group things. Because if I put a link around this is no longer a group. So I need to kind of put the div class around this whole thing with a link in it. So what I mean by that is if I... Right, now that the noise is gone. So if I want to put an ahref, so that way when I click on the image it goes somewhere, which I'll just put a placeholder in there. Right, so that's going to go somewhere. As soon as I do that, see how it's kind of weirded things out? It's just kind of trying to fill them into different heighted boxes now. So that's basically said, oh, you're row 1, you're row 2 now, because this row here for image no longer applies. So if I put a div class, and I'll call it images. There's not a clash of tag names. So the image is in there, it's got its link. And so if I update all of the images to be like that, right there, then I can say container image container dot, yeah, okay, so container dot images, just grabbing this whole chunk. I want you to, I don't need to worry about the width and height so much. I want you to sit in that right same place. But now I want the image that's inside you. So dot container dot images, the image itself. Yes, I need you to be the right height and everything. So now if I save that, that's all still looking as per normal, but as soon as I go over the image, it now wants to click and be a link. So the main thing you're trying to make sure is when you're grouping things up, you're saying, okay, I've got my list item, and it's got a grid of 2 things. So that's one thing. That's going to overlap with that same one. So that's basically going block 1, block 2. But as soon as you get rid of this has become 1, 2 things. Well, this is, yeah, so like it's just now it's had issues. Or I was grouping it by image now, but now this is kind of in charge of that one, or the parent element of this. So I'd have to then refer to the A links. But if I wanted to put links around these too, then it's going to start potentially messing up with it. So this is why, yeah, seems like a lot of divs, but it means you can try to control the groupings as you go. So there you go.